Hatebreed is one of those bands where it feels like they're just everywhere, always, constantly out on the road touring. Frontman Jamie Josta is super active online. He's got his podcast, The Josta Show. Hatebreed puts out a new record every 4 or 5 years, give or take. But outside of album or show announcements, things like that, you know, Hatebreed is one of those bands that's never really in the news for any typical band drama or things like that. Until now, because earlier this week they put out a very brief statement on social media announcing that Matt Bachand of Shadows Fall would be taking over bass in Hatebreed for the foreseeable future in place of Chris Beattie, with the comments on the post turned off and no other information given. Chris Beattie, of course, an original member of Hatebreed going all the way back to the band's inception in 1994, and up to now just one of 2 original members left in the band alongside frontman Jamie Josta. And of course, when an original member of any band, but you know, especially a band that's been around for now over 30 years, when an original member leaves a band, I mean, it certainly raises a lot of questions. And yesterday, which would have been Wednesday, Chris Beattie issued a statement. It was really rather brief, and honestly, it probably left even more questions, with the only real question being answered is that he is in fact out of the band. Here's what Chris Beattie said in his statement on Wednesday. "I just want to take the time to let everyone know that I am doing just fine, and I sincerely appreciate everyone who has reached out. I was under the impression a joint announcement would be agreed upon in advance, but since that was not the case, I wanted to address your concerns in my own post. At this time, I am unable to discuss the specifics surrounding my departure from Hatebreed on November 13th, 2024. However, I want to clarify that the decision to leave the band was not mine, and that my departure was uncalled for and based on misleading and wrongful statements that will be subject to future actions." With that statement, there's a number of things to look at. For one, he says he's been out of the band for 3.5 months now, going back to November 13th. And what's worth pointing out is that it seems that what went on to become Chris Beattie's final show with Hatebreed and the band's most recent performance up until just this week was just a few days prior to November 13th on November 9th in Connecticut with Knocked Loose, Drain, and Military Gun. And before that, they had done another show with Knocked Loose, but most notably, they had just at that point finished their 30th anniversary tour with Carcass, Harm's Way, and Crypta. So obviously this is speculation, but the timing of all of that would lead one to think that either something happened on that 30th anniversary tour between Chris Beattie and the rest of Hatebreed, or, you know, maybe tensions based on whatever the situation is were already high. They came to a head on that tour. It's also possible that maybe things were going on before all of that, and the band felt that it would be, you know, bad press to let Beattie go and then go out and do a 30th anniversary tour since he was an original member of the band. That scenario in particular feels a little less likely than something happening during the 30th anniversary tour, but still could be a possibility. I mean, who knows? I certainly really do not know. I'm just spitballing here, as those scenarios are really what feel most likely to me. But the one thing that I am very curious about is the last sentence of Beattie's statement, where he says his departure was uncalled for and based on misleading and wrongful statements that will be subject to future actions. Obviously, he did not go into detail about what those misleading and wrongful statements were, but it will certainly be interesting to see what subject to future actions means, because beyond a lawsuit, it's hard to imagine exactly what that could mean, unless it's maybe foreshadowing a future more detailed statement where he, you know, reveals more details about exactly what happened. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know the exact meaning behind that, but certainly it was a big enough deal to warrant him saying that in his statement. But beyond that, the only other thing I can say about all of this that I really feel is worth mentioning is that in Beattie's statement, he says that he was under the impression that a joint announcement would be agreed upon in advance, and that is obviously not what happened. In my opinion, at least with that, it feels like there was maybe some sort of disorganization or miscommunication somewhere, because Hatebreed started their Australian tour on February 25th and announced that Matt Bachand was taking over on the 24th, although really it was, when you take into account the time zone in Australia, it was probably the 25th over there when they made that announcement. But you know, a statement would have had to have been made by the time, or really before they went on stage with Bachand over in Australia, because had they went out with Bachand and made no previous announcement, I mean, that probably would have really raised some suspicion as to what was going on in Hatebreed behind the scenes. You'd also figure that Chris Beattie knew when the Australian tour began, or at least had a rough idea. So I don't know. It feels like maybe there was just some sort of disconnect there as far as the, you know, a statement not being properly coordinated. I don't know. I mean, that's just Again, this is all speculation, but regardless, it does feel like a situation where at some point we will get more of an explanation on what happened. I am a bit surprised that we are only finding out just now, given that, you know, a fair bit of time has passed, again, like 3.5 months. Jamie Josta is a pretty open guy, at least it feels that way. Very, very vocal on his podcast, The Josta Show. I'm surprised that it took this long for the news to break, but again, I'm sure we will get more of the story at some point. You'd have to imagine that Chris Beattie will continue moving forward to focus on his career in real estate. And then as far as Hatebreed goes, as mentioned, the band is currently touring over in Australia, some Knotfest performances over there with some headline shows. They're doing Download Festival this summer, taking part in the ridiculously stacked Louder Than Life lineup in Kentucky this fall. It certainly goes without saying, though, that this situation does not feel amicable. Plenty of fans expressing their disappointment online, and this is more speculation for me, but a fan commented on Beattie's post with his statement saying that Beattie is Hatebreed and that Beattie was never too rock star to hang out with said fan, and that he didn't show up 10 minutes before showtime and disappear, which perhaps he was throwing shade at someone else in the band. I don't know. But Beattie responded to that comment saying, "Thanks, much love." So assuming that the whole showing up 10 minutes before the show is about someone else in Hatebreed, I mean, you wouldn't really respond to a negative comment about your band or now former band if there wasn't at least some sort of animosity there. So it really will be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. We'll keep eyes open for updates on the Chris Beattie Hatebreed situation, whether it's something we see in the news or on social media. Maybe we hear about it from Josta himself on The Josta Show. But for now, that's all I got for you. Thanks so much for hanging out. Feel free to drop a like and subscribe below if you feel like it, and I'll see you next time.